Hey everybody, it's September 4th, and that means it's been exactly 1 year since Marvel's Avengers went on sale to the general public. And that means it's what I'm calling the Marvel's Avengers anniversary. What am I trying to say? After several beta rounds and a 3-day early access, Marvel's Avengers was released to the general public on September 4th, 2020, which means that it's been an entire year since the game's debut. Marvel's Avengers anniversary. The Avengers versary is what I'm... In that year, the game has had various ups and downs alongside regular updates to the game. On one hand, the game seems to have received a lot of critical feedback. And on the other hand, the game seems to have a very loyal community of fans who continue to celebrate and enjoy the game. It means it's the Marvel's Avengers anniversary. Is that it? I'm trying to combine anniversary and Avengers together. Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, while I'm someone who has criticisms of the game, I've thoroughly enjoyed Avengers from the beginning and over the past year. Anyway, on today's video, I'm going to talk about the first year of Marvel's Avengers, what I thought, the ups and downs, give a second review of sorts, give some suggestions on how I think the game can improve for its second year, and hit on several other subjects along the way.
Stars and Stripes!
Hello and welcome to another Carrot Scraps video, and by another, I mean the 79th. Now, before we get into everything, of course, you know what time it is. It's disclaimer time. I need to get some things out of the way before we hop into the meat of the video. So we're going to go over a couple of things in this video, and we're going to start off with my elevator pitch review. Essentially, it's a pitch for the game / short review that I can give to somebody as fast as possible to let them know whether they would like Marvel's Avengers or not. Then we're going to move on to a full second review of the game / a review of my thoughts on the first year of Marvel's Avengers. After that, I'll be giving some suggestions on ways that I think that Marvel's Avengers can improve over the next year of its service, and we'll hit up some other subjects that talk about certain aspects of the game more specifically. In addition, we also have a special guest on today's video. A big round of applause to Marvin of Marvin's Adventures fame. They're a game box, so they can't really talk, so. But we do have them. So make sure to grab a snack and get comfortable and get ready, because in addition to all of the other things I mentioned, I have a pretty shocking announcement planned for the end of the video. And it's going to shock you. It's going to be very shocking. Marvin is not the surprise. We already knew that Marvin was going to be here, so don't worry too much about them. So pretty frequently in my Twitch chat, people will come and twitch.tv/carrotscraps if you want to watch me on Twitch. So pretty frequently in my Twitch chat, people will come and ask if they should buy Avengers. Now, obviously that answer is specific to every person, but at this point, I think I have a pretty refined answer for this question. After a year of content and a lot of positive press recently, I think there are a lot of new people who want to check out the game. People who are curious but who haven't committed to picking up Avengers yet. So I thought it would be a good idea to give a modified version of my elevator pitch for why I think you should buy the game and who specifically I think the game would appeal to. First of all, the star of Avengers is the combat gameplay. I think the combat in Avengers is better than most superhero games that I've played. And you can trust me on that one because I'm more of a Spider-Man fan than I am an Avengers fan. I mean, I might be more of a Spider-Man fan than I am a general Marvel fan. So I like to think that that opinion carries some weight to it. Not only is the combat well designed, well polished, and features tremendous depth with interesting progression, but there's an outstanding amount of variety between each of the 9 playable characters. Any one character in terms of design is good enough to carry their own single-player Marvel game in my opinion. And yet the development team was able to make 9 distinct and fun characters for you to choose from. This brings up one of the bigger shortcomings I have of the game. While the combat is incredible and, let's be honest, the center of the game, the mission variety is very underdeveloped. It's definitely something to consider if getting the game is a possibility for you. But that being said, for me, the incredible depth of the character gameplay makes up for the lack of variety in the missions. Moving on, one of the biggest disclaimers I feel I have to make about Avengers is about its grinding. Grinding to increase your digital numbers is a huge part of the game. Now, I personally don't have a problem with grinding in video games, as long as the tools to achieve that grind are entertaining or interesting. In this case, the combat of Avengers is how you grind to level up and earn gear. But I recognize many players don't like grinding in video games, and so I think it's important to know what you're getting into before you buy the game. If grinding is not something that you like, I would keep keep that in mind when considering picking up Avengers. Although I would say again that the combat is fantastic and makes that grind fun. So my final thoughts are, if Avengers is on sale and you're a Marvel fan, I'd say buy it if you're considering it. It's a no-brainer in my opinion. I think with any discount, the game will be worth it to people who enjoy these characters and who are curious to see new, interesting versions of them combined with fantastic action brawler gameplay. On the other hand, if you're considering buying the game at full price, I definitely say the game is still worth it. I would just advise that you consider my criticisms and my context carefully to make sure that it's the type of game that you want before you invest. But generally speaking, I think the game is amazing and something very special. I think there's a lot to be admired if you're a Marvel fan, and I think it's worth the investment of time and money if your interest is piqued. And that's a modified, expanded version on my elevator pitch of why I think you should get Marvel's Avengers. So that was more of a quick review for people who aren't familiar with the game. Now let's transition into a more fleshed out review for people who do know what the game is all about. And maybe I'll reveal my shocking announcement. Probably not though, we're gonna save that for the end of the video. Ooh, I can't wait to reveal it. It's very shocking. Now, I felt pretty positively about Avengers at launch and for several months after, so I thought it would be cool to see if my feelings are still consistent a year later. In addition, I'll give my thoughts on some of the new content released. Well, surprise, surprise, I still love the game. Maybe it's more accurate to say that I've learned new opinions about the game. First of all, the biggest thing that's still consistent is that I love the gameplay. It's still the center of my experience, and it still impresses me every time I play. Not only is there depth to the combat and progression, but I feel like I'm still learning new attacks and abilities that these characters have. Now, I do think that if you choose to play the game with just one character, you're still in for a treat. I mean, after all, it's not like I perfectly balance my gameplay between the other characters. Most of the time I'm playing as Black Widow or Captain America, but I think if you're actively switching between the 9 characters, you're in for a buffet. That was like a metaphor. I don't know, I'm just hungry. Never mind. Let me say that again. But I think if you're actively switching between the 9 characters, you're getting the full experience intended. Now again, hands down, I have the most fun playing as Black Widow or Captain America, and a lot of the time when I start the game, those are the characters that I choose. But that strength that I recognized at launch about how the fun of the game is switching between the characters is still present a year later. In addition, I still really love the grind of the game. Searching for new gear with unique perks to increase my digital numbers and customize my characters is pretty addictive. Now that we have the champion system, which to me is a cool way to numerically brag to other players, I feel like if you're playing every character, you have a long journey ahead of you. That is, if you enjoy grinding, which I do. At least I do when the gameplay is good, which it is here. Something I will say is that I do think that the amount of extremely valuable gear could drop more frequently. This is still my first looter shooter game, and I'm not super experienced when it comes to gear, but it feels like myself and a lot of other players have to get rid of a lot of gear in search of really good drops. I think it's definitely good to keep the gear rare, but I feel most of my playtime when customizing gear is spent destroying it, and I don't have many opportunities to celebrate significant drops. Now, in the weeks leading up to the 1-year anniversary of the game, there's been a larger discussion around the exotics and how often you can get them. For a temporary amount of time, the exotic drops were up to 2-3 times a week, and this seemed to make a lot of players happy, and a lot of players were upset when this was removed. But again, a lot of players were happy to see that to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the game, the exotic gear drop would be resetting every day. Now, like I said, I think there should be more opportunities for players to celebrate great gear more often. And specifically, I think there should be more opportunities for us to get exotic gear. Even though this is my first looter, I feel like I've learned a lot about gear over the past year and in the past 2 months. I've really tried to listen to the criticisms of other players who have played other looter shooters, and I've tried to ask questions to educate myself further. Now, I don't know if these changes are a perfect solution to the gear issue that people seem to have, but I personally think it's a good, or at least an interesting idea to periodically change the exotic drop rate depending on the day of the year or depending on if there's an event active or not. I feel like that keeps a pretty good balance of keeping the loot rare while still making significant drops frequent. But again, even though I'm satisfied with these recent changes and the potential changes that could be coming to the future, I'll continue listening to the community and to other players who are a little bit more educated on looter shooters or looter brawlers in this case. Because even though I have my criticisms, I still love the loot in Marvel's Avengers. But I'm also still open open to learning more about what the loot could be when compared to other games in the genre. On the flip side, I wanted to take a quick second to praise this game for being a looter brawler. I've heard a lot of criticisms about Avengers being a looter game. It turns out that a lot of players don't think that this genre of game works for a superhero story. And I'll admit, I was not a fan of live service games or looter shooters before I bought Avengers, but I took a risk because I'm a Marvel fan and I'm really glad that I did. I like the gear system in Avengers, and I especially like that it's distinct from other Marvel games that I've played. I also personally do think that it makes sense for these Avengers to be looking for gear in their world. I mean, these are Avengers who have been disbanded for a long time, many of whom have lost their identity, their money, or their technology, and they're only just now reassembling and trying to become something similar to what they used to be. So I think it's a cool idea, and I think it was worth the risk for Crystal Dynamics to try, especially if they got someone like me who isn't into this genre of game into Avengers. In addition, the concept of these Avengers scavenging for resources actually does remind me of multiple points in the comics. Specifically, this reminds me of the spot that a lot of heroes find themselves in after a big Marvel event comic. Something like Secret Invasion or Secret Empire. That's a lot of secrets. Geez, Marvel, why do you have so many secrets? Something like the aftermath of Secret Invasion or Secret Empire, where the heroes are trying to get back on their feet after something dramatic happened to the status quo. At least to me, the looter-brawler genre of this game feels very much so inspired by the comics, and it feels very unique when compared to its contemporaries. But let's change our focus and talk about one of my greater criticisms of Marvel's Avengers over the past year. Mission variety has been my #1 criticism of this game since launch. I love the combat and gameplay of Avengers, but it didn't feel like we had a diverse palette of missions and objectives to choose from, and that's been my #1 criticism of the game for the past year. But honestly, that's changing right now. Getting our first Omega level threat and the Monica villain sector show me that the team is dedicated to making mission variety stronger in the game. Not to mention, the new missions and boss fights that we got to see in War for Wakanda shows me that the team is dedicated to making a stronger variety in the missions that they develop. Specifically, these simple innovations when it came to fighting Crossbones in War for Wakanda really felt refreshing when compared to fighting Abomination or Taskmaster. And the Fuse fight from War for Wakanda is one of, if not my favorite new mission added to the game. I absolutely love that objective, and I'd love to see more like it in the future. And not to mention the mission that was very similar to what would be a Horde mode. I still think that mission variety needs more improvement over the next year, but these missions show me that they're dedicated to making these changes. One of my suggestions is that I'd like to see the innovation that we get from the campaigns in Avengers Initiative more often. Sometimes when I replay a campaign mission, I'm absolutely impressed by the quality, but then I think to myself, why can't I play a mission like this more often online? So again, it's good to see that mission variety is improving, but I'd still like to see greater innovation over the next year. And to be clear, I'm not saying that the missions in the game are bad, I'm just saying that there isn't variety, or at least there should be a greater variety in my opinion. Anyway, moving on to events, there are some events that I really loved this year. Tachyon Anomalies being the best event that we saw in my opinion, but Red Room Part 2 being my favorite. Like I've said before, I think there's a place in the game for the events that just add mission chains, and I do appreciate them, but I hope the team is working on developing more events that introduce new gameplay, like Tachyon and Red Room Part 2. Those are the most fun and memorable in my opinion. But even with those two event types, ones that include new gameplay and ones that just include mission chains, I do think we could have had more throughout the year. Once the roadmap was released, I do feel the team was trying to put out more regular content, which was awesome, but at the same time, it felt like there were some empty spots for the game in terms of content drops. And with that being said, I'd say my biggest revelation in terms of how I view the game over the past year is the difference between its qualities as a video game versus its qualities as a live service game. I can pretty confidently say that I absolutely love this video game. But that being said, I think its greatest shortcomings come when contextualizing the game as a live service experience. Even though I love the game for what it is, there are players who wanted a really great live service experience, and I don't think it was delivered consistently throughout the year. But that being said, like my criticisms of mission variety, I think the game is taking a turn in the right direction. In the months preceding the game's 1-year anniversary, we received a pretty significant content drop, multiple events, and non-event events, including the events. In the months preceding the game's 1-year anniversary, we received a pretty significant content drop, not to mention multiple events and multiple opportunities to earn additional XP as well as play the game for free. I think they've been doing a lot to create a lot of buzz around the game and to make the game feel different from week to week. I still think that COVID had its role to play in a lot of the shortcomings of Avengers. I also think that the team are working hard to make a better live service experience, and I think that their ability to do that has become greater since COVID restrictions have become become less strict. Even though I don't think the game is the best live service experience over the past year, I genuinely think it's making improvements to fix that. And I'm hoping that by the end of year 2, I can confidently say that Avengers is an amazing live service experience as well as an amazing video game. Now, with those criticisms in mind, I wanted to change the subject really quickly and highlight some of the qualities of Avengers that I don't think get celebrated nearly enough. As I've said many times, I love this game, but I'm also someone who criticizes it. But that being said, I feel like a lot of the criticisms have distracted from some of the great qualities of Avengers. For example, like the voice acting. The voice talent in Marvel's Avengers is not just good, it's incredible. I mean, it's a game with one of the best collection of voice actors that I've ever seen. Industry veterans giving outstanding performances alongside newcomers who are legends in the making. I mean, Troy Baker, Nolan North, Laura Bailey, and Sandra Saad, along with so many others. And then of course we get new talent that comes to the game with every update, like Christopher Judge. I really can't believe how outstanding the voice acting is in Avengers, and I wish more people would take the time to appreciate it. And I can't say it enough in this video, Crystal Dynamics deserves so much credit for the voice acting in this game, both in terms of casting, performance, and direction. But that's all I'll say for now. Maybe I'll make a whole video about it in the future. Another detail that's super impressive to me about Marvel's Avengers is the engine. Now, of course, there's a lot of bugs and glitches in Marvel's Avengers, we're all familiar with that, but the actual engine that's used for the game is pretty impressive to me. Not only does it look absolutely gorgeous, but it seems to be pretty powerful and pretty competent in a lot of places. There's a reason why so many other games use the same engine, because it's reliable, it's trusted, and it's easy to work with when doing something new. Now, from what I can tell, the engine in Marvel's Avengers has a lot of new stuff put into it, but it is built from previous engines that they've created in the past. But still, I feel like it deserves a lot of credit because it's super impressive to me. And again, not to mention, the graphics are outstanding. Now, I'm not really a stickler for good graphics. I prefer to focus on gameplay over graphics. But this game looks gorgeous, and I think it deserves a lot of credit for that, especially since I already love the gameplay. Lastly, I know not everyone will agree with me on this, but I adore the design work in this game, both in terms of creating its own universe that's separate from other Marvel comics and other Marvel media. I mean, I've already made a video about this, but it's true. The world and universe of this game is super unique, mixing references from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and deep cuts from the comics. For example, like the Super Adaptoid, an iconic Marvel villain that we rarely get to see in the books. So I really appreciate the universe, but also in terms of its character designs for each of the Marvel heroes. One of my favorite things about the designs in this game is that if you see one of these characters isolated from Avengers, you know exactly what Marvel media it's from. Captain America, Hawkeye, Black Panther, all of these characters look similar enough to their original source material, but distinct enough to be noticeable immediately. You know exactly where they came from. They came from Marvel's Avengers. And maybe not everybody's a big fan of those designs. I personally love these designs, but I love that recognizability and the talent that it took to make it recognizable but distinct. I also feel like I've gained a greater appreciation for the story in the Reassemble campaign. Last time I had said that the story was okay, but that the real star of the campaign was the characters. And that's still true for the most part, but now I feel like I appreciate the story way more. For example, I really liked that the story of MODOK wanting to remove all superpowered people from the world directly tied into the conflict of the main heroes, Kamala Khan and the Avengers. Kamala Khan obviously has her internal conflict, and she struggles to find her own resolve and be herself. But the Avengers also struggle with something similar. They're heroes who struggle with the idea that they agree with MODOK. They definitely disagree with his methods, but the idea that superpowered people are somewhat to blame for a lot of the problems in their society is somewhat true. The Avengers feel like they've made a mistake, whether it was on A-Day or whether it was failing to act after the events of A-Day. And the story is them coming to terms with that mistake and deciding that the world is better off with them even if they don't get it right every time. It's not a super complicated concept, it's very simple, but it's something that I've learned to appreciate. But of course, I still wish we had more time to play with each of the Avengers in the main campaign. Now, there are a lot of other qualities about Avengers that I love, but those are just a couple of aspects of the game that I think deserve way more credit. Anyway, let's finish off my second review of the game by going over the DLC and expansion content. The 3 characters and DLC content drops throughout the year have been one of the greatest additions to the game. Each of them add a tremendous amount of content in the form of a brand new character, and that character gives players hours of gameplay to grind and power up. Not to mention learning that specific character's qualities. The story's been really interesting to follow. I really love this version of the Avengers and the Marvel Universe, even if there were hiccups in terms of plot holes. Looking back, even though a lot of players criticize the amount of characters that we got, I think that getting 3 characters is pretty cool. And not just those 3 characters, but new stories and new missions that came with them. In year 2, it would be awesome if we could get 4 characters, but if 3 is the standard moving forward, I wouldn't mind that. The characters that we get are so consistently well polished that it makes sense why they take so long to finish. And I don't mind being patient to get something outstanding. So in the end, yes, I still love Marvel's Avengers. I play it all the time, and I rarely get bored of it. And even when I do, all I have to do is switch to another character and I'll be fine. Even though it struggled as a live service experience, I think it's on the right track for the future, and I'm confident that the team will try their best to really knock it out of the park in year 2. So Marvin, I've prepared some questions. I hope you don't mind. Yeah, all right. First question, what does it feel like? I didn't finish the question. I didn't finish the rest of my list, so you can just answer that however you feel. What does it feel like? I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I didn't get a chance to finish the whole list, okay? Get off my back. Hello everyone, and welcome to Suggestion Time, the show that I created where I offer suggestions to Marvel's Avengers. It's a very specific show that I've created. So let's focus on suggestions that could improve the live service aspect of the game. Now keep in mind, this is only my second live service game, and technically my first looter, so I am approaching this subject from that standpoint. The main suggestion is something I've already said. Players need more of a reason to log into the game every single day. Login bonuses and challenges that refresh are simple ways to get people to keep playing. And I know what you're thinking, there are already challenges in the game, but the problem is once you've completed your challenge card for each of the heroes, then those challenges aren't as interesting. I mean, you earn points, but those points can't really be used for anything. So maybe either a new challenge system or something that I've wanted for a really long time, more hero challenge cards added to the game. Maybe there could be additional challenge cards for each hero that you have to pay for, and then one general free challenge card that gives you one skin or one nameplate for each character. Even if that's done once a year, I think that would be really helpful. With the release of War for Wakanda, it's felt really good to play the game every day and have challenges to actually complete. It's been so long since I've had a hero challenge card that I forgot that feeling, and I think that feeling is something that they should chase in terms of design. Moving on, I think villain sectors are a really good way to get people playing every day. The only problem is that we don't have a huge pool of villains to pull from. I know we just got an Omega level threat in the form of the Super Adaptoid, but I personally don't think there's any reason not to have a villain sector for that enemy just because we have an OLT. In addition, the 2 villains that were introduced in War for Wakanda would be great to see in the villain sectors again, even if we do see them as OLTs later. I also absolutely love the fuse fight from War for Wakanda, and while I know a lot of players are done with giant robotic enemies, I'm disappointed that that wasn't made a villain sector. In general, I think rolling the dice on villains you can fight every day is a great way to bring people back to the game. Moving on to events, I think that's another great way to get people to keep playing, and while the development team has shown that they really do want to focus more on events moving forward, I still think that they should focus more on bringing events to the game that change the gameplay in some way. I think a good schedule to go by is to have an event that changes the gameplay like Tachyon Anomalies or Red Room Takeover, and then follow that with an event that's just mission chains. And then after that, you'd introduce another event that changes the gameplay, like the Corrupted Vibranium event. So that way the game has regular content coming in and the developers have a little bit more time to work on the bigger events. And those are just some simple ideas off the top of my head, but in general, I still think that the live service aspect of the game needs to be improved further. I see the steps they're taking in making the live service more engaging, but they need to continue moving forward. I think War for Wakanda was an amazing DLC, but it was missing a lot that would encourage players to continue playing after they finished the campaign. So the general health of the live service aspect of the game is one of the biggest things that I want to see improve over the next year. Anyway, let's move on from that suggestion. And the next subject is the cosmetic rework. Cosmetics have been the source of a lot of tension within the player community since launch of the game. Since launch, players have had the option to purchase skins with real money or to earn them through various means by playing the game. However, in March, with the release of the Future Imperfect DLC, earnable cosmetics were severely edited and mostly removed from the game. This was removed with the promise of an upcoming unscheduled cosmetic rework. It's been months now without an update on that cosmetic rework, and many players are losing patience. I personally think that this rework should come soon since it's been such a huge topic in the community. Clearly, players are excited and enthusiastic about this part of the game, so I think it deserves priority attention. However, if for whatever reason the cosmetic rework really isn't ready anytime soon, I think an update on how earnable cosmetics are going to change in the future would be much appreciated. I totally understand it's difficult to release details on something that isn't finalized yet for various reasons, including potential legal ones. However, if it's possible, I think the effort should be put into releasing the cosmetic rework soon or giving information on what it will be. A great way to do this would be to explain what's going on with the cosmetic rework in a blog post or a live stream, and maybe it would earn a little bit more patience. But as it stands, I totally understand why players are frustrated with this. Either way, the silence on the subject is the biggest problem in my opinion, not the removal of the feature itself. Another suggestion I've had for a while, but I don't think I've given enough lip service, is that I think that traversal needs to be looked at again in the game. Platforming and maneuverability is really great, but when it comes from going from point A to point B, you're only running. And that run is pretty slow, and so it feels like most players are forced to jump repeatedly. I've legitimately had people ask in my Twitch chat, why do I keep jumping? And it's because it feels faster or it is faster. So I don't know if a traversal overhaul is possible, but I would love to see something like that in the future. Because combat is really fun, and I just wish that I had as much of a good time going from point A to point B. Anyway, moving on to my next suggestion. I've mentioned this before, specifically in my original review of the game, but I think photo mode is missing a lot of great features that could really improve that part of the game. There's a really dedicated digital photography community that has formed around Avengers, and I'm happy to say that I've become somewhat a part of it. You can do some really creative things with the tools you're given in the game at the moment, and generally speaking, I think limitations provide room for the greatest inspiration. All of that being said, there are a lot of features that I'd love to see added to photo mode, or limitations lifted from the photo mode at the moment, like the draw distance or how you can't move the camera while characters are flying, removing enemies from the screen, or turning off energy effects, turning off gear status effects, turning off certain HUD options, giving players the option to change facial expressions, change poses, or even use emotes in the photo mode section, adding stickers and overlays and banners to your images, and even the ability to have more than just 4 characters would be really nice. Maybe having that option in the customizable harm room would be a good idea, for example. All of those ideas plus way more would be great to have in the photo mode. The photo mode players in the Avengers community are a very vocal and proud bunch, and I think it would be really rewarding for them if a photo mode update came to the game. In addition, I think a rework like that could bring more people into the digital photography scene for Avengers, which is always a good thing. I've really come to love the photo mode in the game, and I work with its limitations, but I would really love to see more improvements come like the ones that I suggested. Lastly, my final suggestion for Marvel's Avengers comes back to mission variety. As I said, there's been a lot of improvements in mission variety recently, and it seems like we're moving in the right direction. Especially in War for Wakanda, there are some really creative missions that make me feel like the developers are listening to this criticism. So in the next year, I hope we see even more variety in terms of missions, and I hope players have a vast buffet of mission options to choose from when they want to play the game. I just did it again. Why do I keep mentioning buffets? Whatever. In the end, I think it's clear that I absolutely adore Avengers, and I hope everybody knows that I make these suggestions because I love the game and I want to see it improve for myself and for others. So I hope my suggestions and the suggestions of other players are considered in the development of the game over the next year. I feel awkward. Like, I don't know. It's like a celebrity thing, you know what I mean? Like, I'm starstruck, you know what I mean? It's hard for me to like sort out all my thoughts. I've got so many thoughts, and I just feel like I'm gonna trip over, you know, an idea wire, a worry obstacle. I'm gonna trip because I'm in the presence of you. Wow, you really don't talk, do you? So we're here, and now we're going to talk about bugs and glitches. I've had a very interesting relationship with bugs and glitches throughout the year of Marvel's Avengers. I think for a lot of people who have and haven't played the game, bugs and glitches are a huge part of the Marvel's Avengers experience. But speaking for myself, they haven't been a big part of my experience with the game, at least for the most part. For a while, I really didn't experience many bugs, and I honestly could think of more buggy games that I had played. But the thing is, as time went on, I started to experience more bugs personally, and I started to experience bugs that affected large majorities of the player base. Now, there have been some awful bugs throughout the year, including the IP address bug, which is potentially one of the worst bugs I've seen in any video game ever, and bugs that aren't as serious as that, but still are tremendously more serious than others. For example, like the bug that prevented a lot of players from playing the Red Room Takeover. And there are even bugs that wipe people's save data. Although from what I can tell, it seems that most of the time if that happens, there are ways to retrieve your data, at least for the most part. Now, those bugs are really serious, and all I can say to the dev team is that I really hope that in the future, these kind of problems are worked out before the game goes live. And I understand to a degree the dev team is still working under COVID conditions, and that most live service games experience regular problems like this. But especially for those more serious bugs that I mentioned, I implore the developers to try as best as they can to avoid them in the future. Now let's focus on the bugs that I've experienced most recently, and more specifically the last month or even just the last 2 weeks. I feel like I've experienced a lot more bugs now than I did at the beginning of the game, which I know will leave a lot of you scratching your heads. And I wanted to talk about my experience because I think it could help figure out why these bugs are happening. At least it could identify maybe the source for some of these problems. Anyway, when Avengers launched, I played the game on PC, Xbox One, and PS4, and then eventually I went on to PS5. I played on those multiple consoles and I played for many hours. And with all of that, I really didn't experience that many problems. But another important detail I've come to realize is that at the time, I wasn't playing online really at all. I'm not someone who's really into live service or multiplayer games, which is why Avengers was such a new domain for me. But as time went on, I started to play more online, and that's when I experienced more bugs. And those bugs were mostly minor in my opinion. I know some people disagree with me on this, but if I can reload a checkpoint and everything will be fine, to me that's not the worst thing in the world. I still consider that a minor bug as long as a reloaded checkpoint can fix it. I also consider most visual bugs to be minor in nature as well. And that was the majority of the bugs that I experienced when I started playing online. However, recently I started experiencing more severe bugs. Bugs that prevented me from starting missions or completing missions or would stop missions halfway through. And in my experience, these more severe bugs almost always happened when I was playing with people on my friends list. And I don't know if that's a huge revelation, I don't know if that's really helpful information, but I just wanted to get that out there. When I played offline, I didn't really experience any bugs. When I played online with random people, I experienced minor bugs, and when I played with people on my friends list, that's when I experienced more severe bugs. Now overall, my experience with the game has been fine when it comes to bugs and glitches. But I want to be clear that just because that's my experience, that doesn't mean that I'm trying to invalidate the other players who have gone through similar things or more than I have. So again, I know that the developers are aware of these problems, but if there's any way to avoid them in the future and to create more polish in Avengers, I think you should try as best as you can. And I hope explaining what bugs I've experienced and how I've experienced them will be somewhat helpful in the future of making the game more polished. And that's about all I have to say about bugs and glitches for now. Anyway, speaking of community feedback, let's transition into our next section. And that next section is my big announcement? No, not yet. It's not time. I don't know. We gotta draw more suspense. Thought I forgot, huh? Yeah, the next section is community. Not my big surprise, so I hope that's okay. I wanted to take some time to acknowledge the amazing Marvel's Avengers community really quickly. A community that I've been a part of since the beginning, and that has only become more interesting and more accepting as time has gone on. The community of the Marvel's Avengers video game is one of my favorite parts of the game. It's something that as a beginner in content creation, I didn't expect myself to be as big of a part of as I became. But in a lot of ways, playing the game has come packaged with communicating with many of the other players. Which maybe sounds obvious to most players because it's a live service game, but to me, as somebody who doesn't really play many multiplayer or live service games, it was a welcomed surprise. I really love the Avengers community. They are amazing, intelligent, and talented people who express themselves daily, whether that's with praise or with criticism. But I did want to briefly address the positivity and negativity that we see often in the community. I see a lot of tension between players, and I don't think there should be so much hostility. At the end of the day, it's a video game. As I always say, it's good to be critical. It's an important part of art, whether you're consuming it or whether you're creating it. It's especially good to be critical of something you've purchased. The only way what we love can get better is through criticism, and that criticism can apply to a product or even a person. However, a criticism shouldn't be used as a shield to be rude to other people. If someone is enjoying the game, there's no need to try and shatter their experience, especially if they hear your criticism and agree, but still enjoy the game or disagree with your specific criticisms. It's your right to express that criticism, but people don't have to agree with your assessment. And on top of that, people don't need to consume perfect art at all times. I say it all the time, I don't read superhero stories because they're perfect storytelling. I read them because I like superheroes. Whether they're good or bad really isn't the reason why I'm a fan of them in the first place. Now, obviously, I have opinions about those superhero stories. There are many stories that I think are some of the best stories ever told, and some that I think are the worst. But the reason I enjoy them starts with me just being a fan of superheroes. So keep that in mind when you're criticizing something and when you interact with somebody who doesn't agree with your criticism. They don't need to agree with you, and even if they do agree with you, you, they can still enjoy that product. On the other hand, when it comes to the more positive side of the community, I've seen many players who seem to be threatened by criticism. And my message to those people is to try not to let critical thinking upset you too much. Criticism is not inherently negativity. Criticism is especially not toxicity. It's all about the way it's expressed. You can be critical of something that you absolutely love, and you can listen to someone's criticism and still not agree with them. But even if you don't agree, you can still respect their right to express themselves. So I'd say try to respect others who are being openly critical. See if you can learn something from their criticism, and make sure to remember that you don't need to change your mind just because they make a specific point. At the end of the day, you like what you like for whatever reason, and that doesn't need to change just because someone else expresses themselves. But as I also said earlier, criticism should not be used as a shield to be rude to people. There are plenty of people who express their criticism in really rude and unproductive ways, in my opinion. And not only does that not get your point across, it's also just kind of mean. Anyway, like I said, the community in general is fantastic. I'm always impressed by the amount of smart and talented people expressing themselves. But I think over the next year, we should try and bridge the gap between these perceived sides. Those who celebrate the game and those who criticize the game can exist together, and often might be the same exact person. There are plenty of people who are quote-unquote negative about the game, but I know love it, and there are plenty of people who love the game, but who also have criticisms. These aren't two separate groups. They're often the same people or two sides of the same coin. I think the more we remember that and the more we embrace it, the better the community will be this time next year. So yeah, I'll do like the in-betweens, and then they'll play like a pre-recorded segment. So we're good for now. Do you want like a soda or something? We got Fanta, Coke Zero. You don't drink soda? You could have just been polite and accepted the soda and, you know, not drinking it. I feel like it's a little rude to turn down. Whatever, it's fine. It's fine. All right, let's stop playing games. Let's delay this no longer. At the start of this video, I hinted at the fact that I was going to be making a shocking announcement at the end of the video. Well, that time has come. I hope you're prepared. My shocking announcement is that Marvel's Avengers is not just a game I enjoy, but it is without a doubt my favorite Marvel video game ever made. You know, thinking about it, I feel like I've said that like a bunch of times, like on Twitter and on Twitch. It's like, I guess it's not as shocking as I thought. Yeah. It was more shocking maybe when I didn't say it a bunch of times, but now like it's not really an announcement. I'm just saying it again. All right, well, that's my bad. You know, what are you going to do? You make mistakes sometimes. I made a mistake this time. Okay, anyway, all jokes aside, yeah, this is my favorite Marvel video game. And I've had that inkling for a while. I did want to wait until I made this video, but I couldn't help it. You see, the thing is, whenever I get like really into something that just came out, and I get that inkling that like this might be my favorite movie or my favorite band or my favorite video game, I try to tell myself to wait patiently at least 1 year before I start saying that publicly. Because, you know, sometimes when you experience a piece of media, you get kind of wrapped up in the moment, and that's totally fine. But if I'm going to say something is like my favorite, I want to make sure. And so I've kind of sat on this for a while, thinking about other Marvel games and playing some to kind of jog my memory. And even though I came to this conclusion kind of early for my standards, I genuinely think that Marvel's Avengers is my favorite Marvel game. And I think that's pretty significant that I feel confident enough to call an Avengers game my favorite Marvel video game. Firstly, because there are so many fantastic Marvel games out there. And secondly, because I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. He's my favorite superhero, and yet I enjoy this game way more than the Insomniac Spider-Man games, or any Spider-Man games for that matter. Seriously, I think this game is fantastic, and I have a really close connection to it. I've never called the game perfect, but it's been consistently fun from even before its release. I do think it's interesting to note that a lot of my criticisms of the game are beginning to change even as we speak. Mission variety has been a criticism of mine since launch, and wanting a better live service experience for all players has become one of my stronger criticisms over the year. But with recent content drops, new missions, and events, it seems like those criticisms are being addressed. So yes, I still love Marvel's Avengers, and have really enjoyed playing the game and being a part of the community over the last year. Year 1 definitely had some turbulence, but the game was always fun, and that fun still hasn't changed. I can't wait to see year 2 of Marvel's Avengers, and hopefully next year, I'll be able to sing its praises even louder. Now before we go, I wanted to give a huge thank you to the developers who have worked super hard on the game, even during a dangerous and super stressful pandemic. And a big thank you to the community who have supported the game and other players over the past year. I think the game is fantastic on its own, and that it has an amazing core, but it wouldn't be what it is without the continued work of the devs and the enthusiasm of the community. So I wanted to say that I wholeheartedly appreciate the hard work and the enthusiasm from both of you. Before we go, I want to thank our guest so much. Marvin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks. It's not often I'm in the spotlight, so I appreciate all the attention and the hospitality.
You could talk this whole time? Oh, and now you're gonna... You're difficult. You're very difficult. It's like pulling teeth with this interview with you.
Sorry, I don't mean to be difficult.
All right. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching. If for some reason you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and to subscribe to my channel for more. As regular viewers know, I make a variety of content on my channel, and I'm always going to make the videos that I want to make. But if you see something you like, let me know, and I'll try to prioritize that kind of content in the future. If you want to watch me play Marvel's Avengers or other video games live, check me out on Twitch at twitch.tv/carrotscraps, and all my other social media, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, are at carrotscraps as well. So I want to thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. What are your hobbies? Do you go jogging? I feel like that'd be difficult for you. You know, once I found a copy of Alien Isolation on the street, and it had the game inside of it. I know that's not really like relevant to anything. I was reminded of that story, and I wanted to let you know. I wanted to share it with you. Thank you for listening to me. I feel like I'm ruining this interview. What do you think?
Yes, I was actually just about to say that.